The moment I saw Deborah Mitchell standing at my front door with that clipboard pressed against her chest like a shield, I knew my day was about to get complicated. I had just finished loading the first batch of boxes into the massive shipping container I'd rented for my upcoming move, and sweat was still dripping down my back from hauling furniture in the Phoenix heat. My name is Connor Griffith, and I'd lived in this Scottsdale neighborhood for 5 years, long enough to know that when the HOA president shows up unannounced, you're either getting fined or someone has complained about something ridiculous. "Connor, we need to talk about that eyesore in your driveway," Deborah said, not even bothering with a greeting. She was in her late 40s with perfectly highlighted blonde hair that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill, and she wore a white linen pantsuit despite it being 98 degrees outside. I wiped my hands on my jeans and stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door shut behind me. "You mean the container I'm using to move? What about it? It's a violation of our community standards." Section 12. Paragraph 4 of the HOA guidelines clearly states that no commercial vehicles or storage containers are permitted in driveways or visible from the street for more than 48 hours. I felt my jaw tighten. "Deborah, I submitted a request form 3 weeks ago. I got approval from the Architectural Review Committee. I have the email." She waved her hand dismissively. "That was before I reviewed it personally. As president, I have veto power over committee decisions that don't align with our community vision. You'll need to remove it immediately." "I'm moving in 2 weeks. Everything I own is either in that container or going into it. Where exactly do you expect me to put it?" "That's not my problem, Connor. You should have planned better. Perhaps you could rent space at one of those storage facilities on Shea Boulevard." She clicked her pen and made a note on her clipboard. "You have until tomorrow at 5 p.m. or you'll be fined $500 per day." I stared at her, trying to process the absurdity of what she was saying. Tomorrow, that's less than 24 hours. 27 hours, technically. "I'm being generous with the timeline." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, and Connor, I'm going to need that container for my daughter's wedding next month. We need it to store tables and chairs and decorations. Since you'll be moving it anyway, you might as well just let me have it." "I'll handle the rental company." And there it was, the real reason for her sudden enforcement of a rule that half the neighborhood had broken at one point or another. Deborah didn't just want my container gone. She wanted to take it for herself. "The container is under my name, paid for through the end of next month. You want one, rent your own." Her expression hardened. "I tried. There's apparently a shortage because of some construction boom downtown. Every rental company is booked solid for the next 6 weeks. This is your chance to be a good neighbor and help out a fellow community member. By giving you something I paid for and desperately need, think of it as a community contribution. I'm sure we could work out some arrangement regarding those fines." The threat was clear. Give her the container or face financial penalties that would add up quickly. I'd done the math already in my head. At $500 per day for 2 weeks, that would be $7,000. Money I didn't have to spare, especially with moving expenses already stretching my budget. "I need to think about it," I said, knowing I needed time to figure out my options. "You have until tomorrow at 5, Deborah repeated. "Make the right choice, Connor." She turned and walked down my driveway, her heels clicking on the concrete. I went back inside and pulled up the HOA guidelines on my laptop. Section 12, Paragraph 4 did exist, but it also included provisions for temporary exceptions with committee approval, which I had received. I took screenshots of the approval email and the relevant sections, then called my real estate attorney, a guy named Mike who'd helped me with the house purchase years ago. "She can't do this, right?" I asked after explaining the situation. Mike sighed on the other end of the line. Technically, if the HOA bylaws give the president veto power, she might have a legal leg to stand on. But the fact that you already received approval and acted on it complicates things. You could fight it, but that means lawyer fees and possibly going to court. Could take months. I'm moving in 2 weeks. Then you're kind of stuck. My advice, try to work something out with her or find alternative storage fast. I hung up feeling frustrated and trapped. I spent the rest of the afternoon researching storage options and calling rental companies, confirming what Deborah had said. Everything was booked. The best I could find was a facility in Mesa, nearly 30 miles away, and even that was only available in 3 weeks. That evening, I was sitting on my back patio trying to come up with a solution when my neighbor, Janet Morrison, poked her head over the fence. Janet was in her early 60s, a retired teacher who'd lived in the neighborhood since it was built 15 years ago. "I heard Deborah paid you a visit today," she said. "The whole street heard, actually. She wasn't exactly quiet." I laughed bitterly. "Yeah, she wants my shipping container. For her daughter's wedding, I bet. She's been talking about it nonstop at every HOA meeting for months." Janet climbed up on what must have been a step stool on her side because suddenly I could see her face more clearly. "Did she threaten you with fines? $500 a day starting tomorrow?" Janet shook her head. "That woman is something else. You know she's made enemies with half the neighborhood, right? Last month she tried to fine the Johnsons for painting their shutters the wrong shade of beige. Before that, she went after the Patel family for having too many cars in their driveway during their son's graduation party." "I remember that. Didn't Mr. Patel file a complaint against her?" "He did, but it went nowhere. Deborah controls the board. She handpicked every member after the last election. They're all friends of hers from her country club." Janet paused. "You know who really hates her, though? Patricia Henderson. Lives over on Saguaro Drive, the house with the big fountain out front." I knew the house. It was one of the larger properties in the neighborhood, set back from the street with mature landscaping. "What happened there?" "Patricia wanted to put in a basketball hoop for her grandson. Deborah denied it, said it would lower property values. Then 2 months later, Deborah's nephew moved into a rental on Desert Willow and put up a basketball hoop. When Patricia pointed out the hypocrisy, Deborah claimed it was a different situation because of some technicality nobody understood. They've been feuding ever since. An idea started forming in my mind. How much does Patricia hate her? Enough that she's been talking about running for HOA president next election. "Why?" "Just curious," I said, but my brain was already working through the possibilities. The next morning, I drove over to Saguaro Drive and knocked on Patricia Henderson's door. She answered after a moment, a tall woman in her mid-50s with short gray hair and shrewd dark eyes. "Can I help you? My name is Connor Griffith. I live over on Mesquite Lane. I wanted to talk to you about Deborah Mitchell and a shipping container." Her expression shifted from polite confusion to interested attention. "Come in." Patricia's house was beautiful, decorated with southwestern art and comfortable furniture. She offered me coffee, which I accepted, and we sat in her living room while I explained the situation. "So she's trying to steal your moving container by threatening you with fines," Patricia said when I finished. "That sounds exactly like Deborah. She tried something similar with the Rodriguez family last year. They needed a dumpster for a remodel. She said it was against the rules. Then suddenly, her sister needed the dumpster for her own project. Janet Morrison mentioned you and Deborah have had some conflicts." Patricia laughed sharply. "That's putting it mildly. The woman is a tyrant who uses the HOA as her personal fiefdom. I've been documenting her abuses for 2 years now, waiting for the right moment to make a move. What if I told you I had a way for you to get under her skin and help me out at the same time? Her eyes lit up. I'm listening. Deborah wants my container for her daughter's wedding. She's trying to force me to give it up. But the rental is in my name, paid through the end of next month. I can transfer the rental to whoever I want. And you want to transfer it to me instead of her. I want to rent it to you at half the price I'm paying. I need to move my stuff to a storage facility in Mesa next week. After that, the container is just sitting there costing me money I won't get back. You can have it for the rest of the rental period. Use it for whatever you want. Store things, use it for a project, whatever. All I ask is that you make sure Deborah knows you have it. Patricia was quiet for a moment, thinking. How much are you paying? The rental is $2,000 for the month. I'll transfer it to you for $1,000. I don't really need a shipping container. No, but you need leverage against Deborah. Imagine her face when she realizes you have exactly what she wanted. The daughter's wedding is next month, right? She's going to be scrambling to find alternatives, getting more desperate by the day, and the whole time she'll know you have a solution sitting in your driveway. A slow smile spread across Patricia's face. You're devious. I like that. But what about your fines? She'll still come after you. Let her. I have written approval from the committee. If she wants to fine me, I'll fight it. I already talked to a lawyer. It'll be messy, but the point is she won't get what she wants, and you'll have prime ammunition for your campaign against her. Patricia stood and walked to her window, looking out at her front yard. Her daughter is getting married at the Phoenician Resort. It's supposed to be this huge event, 500 guests. Deborah has been planning it for over a year. She's been bragging at every meeting about how perfect and elegant everything will be. And now she won't have storage for all her supplies. She'll have to rent a truck or find some other expensive solution. It'll drive her crazy. Patricia turned back to me. You have a deal. I'll take the container. We shook hands and I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Not because my problem was solved necessarily, but because I'd found a way to push back against Deborah's bullying. We worked out the details. I would move my stuff out of the container by the following weekend, and the rental company would relocate it to Patricia's address the Monday after that. As I drove home, my phone rang. It was Deborah. Connor, have you made a decision about the container? I have. I'm not giving it to you. There was a pause. Then you're accepting the fines. I'm prepared to challenge them. I have written approval from the architectural committee. Your veto power doesn't override approvals that have already been acted upon. My lawyer is very confident. Your lawyer is wrong. You'll be wasting your money fighting this. That's my choice to make. Have a good day, Deborah. I hung up before she could respond. I spent the rest of that week moving my belongings into the storage facility in Mesa. It was exhausting work, loading and unloading boxes and furniture, making multiple trips back and forth. My friend Marcus came to help, and we worked late into the evenings getting everything transferred. You're really going through all this just to spite her? Marcus asked as we carried my couch out to his truck. It's not spite. It's principle. She can't just bully people into giving her what she wants. Man, I don't miss having an HOA. That's why I rent an apartment. No neighbors trying to tell me what color my mailbox can be. Most HOAs aren't this bad. Deborah is just a special case. By Friday afternoon, the container was empty. I called the rental company and arranged for the transfer to Patricia's address. They said they'd move it Monday morning. That evening, I got an email from Deborah with an official notice of fine attached, $500 per day, starting from the deadline she'd set. The total was already up to $2,000. I forwarded it to my lawyer and asked him to draft a response challenging the fines. This might actually work in your favor. Mike said when he called me back. If she's already issuing fines for a container that you'll have removed before anyone could reasonably challenge the violation, it shows she's acting in bad faith. Keep records of everything. Saturday morning, I saw Deborah drive past my house slowly, clearly checking to see if the container was still there. It was. Sunday, she drove past twice. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Monday morning, I watched from my window as the rental company truck arrived to move the container. Deborah came out of her house 3 doors down the moment she heard the truck's backup beeping. She practically ran down the street. "Finally," she called out to me. I had stepped outside to direct the movers. "I knew you'd see reason. Just have them bring it to my address." "They're not bringing it to your address," her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "I mean I rented it to someone else. The container is going to Patricia Henderson's house." The color drained from Deborah's face. "Patricia, you can't be serious, very serious." "She's paying me for the rest of the rental period. It's a done deal." "Connor, that's not funny. I need that container. My daughter's wedding is in 3 weeks. We have supplies being delivered, we have rentals coming in. Everything was supposed to be stored in that container." "You should have thought of that before you tried to bully me into giving it to you." "Actions have consequences, Deborah." Her expression shifted from shock to furious. "You did this on purpose. This is retaliation." "No, this is me finding a solution to my problem." "You wanted the container gone from my property. It's being removed. What happens to it after that is none of your concern. I'll increase your fines. I'll make your life miserable. You're already trying to fine me $2,000 for having a legally approved container in my driveway. How much more miserable can you make things?" I turned to the moving crew. "Patricia's address is 4782 Saguaro Drive. She's expecting you." Deborah stood there sputtering as the truck drove away with the container. I went back inside, feeling more satisfied than I had in weeks. The fallout was immediate. By Monday afternoon, I'd received 3 emails from Deborah, each more threatening than the last. She claimed I'd intentionally interfered with her daughter's wedding, that I'd conspired with Patricia to damage her reputation, that I'd violated some obscure HOA rule about transferring rental agreements. Tuesday, she called an emergency HOA board meeting. I wasn't invited, but Janet called me afterward to fill me in. "It was a disaster," Janet said, laughing. "Deborah was ranting about you and Patricia, saying you'd both colluded to sabotage her. She wanted the board to issue additional fines and take legal action. But here's the thing. Half the people there were sick of her attitude. Tom Bradshaw actually stood up and asked her why she was using HOA resources to deal with personal grievances. She nearly lost it. What happened? Nothing concrete. They tabled the discussion until the next regular meeting. But people are talking. The word is getting out about what she tried to do, and not everyone is on her side. Patricia has been very strategic, by the way. She's been telling everyone who'll listen that she's just renting a container for storage purposes, completely above board. And she can't understand why Deborah is so upset about it. Wednesday morning, I got a certified letter from the HOA's attorney demanding I pay the accumulated fines, which were now at $3,500. Mike drafted a response denying the charges and explaining that I'd had proper approval. "They're going to have to take this to arbitration or court," Mike said. "And honestly, I don't think they want to. It'll cost them more in legal fees than they'd collect in fines, and they know their case is weak." But Deborah wasn't backing down. Thursday, I received notice that she'd filed a lien against my property for the unpaid fines. It was a bold and probably illegal move, but it complicated my upcoming move. I couldn't close on the sale of my house with a lien attached. Now she's crossed a line. Mike said when I forwarded him the lien notice. Filing a fraudulent lien is illegal in Arizona. She's opened herself up to serious liability. What do? We file a motion to remove the lien and we sue for damages. This is going to get ugly, Connor. Are you prepared for that? I thought about it. Part of me just wanted to be done with the whole mess, to pay the fines and move on with my life. But that would mean Deborah won, that she'd successfully bullied someone into submission. It would mean the next person she targeted would face the same treatment. I'm prepared. Let's do it. Mike filed the motion Friday morning. By Friday afternoon, Deborah had called me 6 times. I didn't answer. Instead, I drove over to Patricia's house to see how she was handling things. The shipping container sat prominently in her circular driveway, impossible to miss from the street. Patricia had even hung a small decorative banner on it that said Henderson Storage. She's been by 3 times, Patricia said, inviting me into her kitchen. Twice she just drove past slowly. Once she actually came to the door. What did she say? She offered to buy the container from me. Started at $2,000, went up to $5,000 by the end of the conversation. I told her it wasn't for sale at any price. Patricia grinned. You should have seen her face. I thought she might actually cry. Her daughter's wedding is coming up fast. I know. I'm counting on that. Every day that passes, she gets more desperate. And every day, more people in the neighborhood hear about what she tried to do to you. Patricia pulled out her phone and showed me a Facebook group. Look at this. It's the unofficial neighborhood group, the one she's not part of. People are posting about it. I scrolled through the posts. Dozens of neighbors weighing in, most of them critical of Deborah. Several people shared their own stories of her abusive behavior as HOA president. A few defended her, but they were in the minority. This is bigger than just us now, Patricia said. People are angry. There's talk of calling a special election to recall her from the board. Can they do that? According to the bylaws, yes. If 15% of homeowners sign a petition, they can force a recall vote. We're almost there. Things moved quickly after that. The following Monday, I received notice that my motion to remove the lien had been granted. The judge had reviewed the case and determined that the HOA had no valid basis for the lien, and ordered it removed immediately. Furthermore, the judge issued a temporary restraining order preventing the HOA from filing any additional liens or taking any collection actions until the underlying dispute was resolved. Deborah was furious. She sent an email to the entire neighborhood claiming I'd used legal technicalities to avoid paying legitimate fines, and that my actions were undermining the entire community. It backfired spectacularly. People who'd been on the fence about the situation saw her email as petty and vindictive. The petition for her recall gained 50 more signatures in 2 days. Wednesday, 1 week before her daughter's wedding, Deborah came to my house again. This time she looked different, tired, defeated. Can we talk? She asked. There was no clipboard, no threatening posture. Just a middle-aged woman who looked like she'd been crying. I let her in and we sat in my living room, the same room where I'd packed up most of my belongings weeks earlier. I'm sorry, she said. I handled this badly. I was desperate and I took it out on you. It wasn't right. No, it wasn't. My daughter's wedding is in 6 days. I've been trying to find alternatives, but everything is falling apart. The rental company for the chairs messed up our order. The florist needs somewhere to store arrangements overnight because the resort won't let her set up until the morning of. I thought having that container would solve everything. Instead, I've made a mess of everything. I wanted to feel triumphant. This was what I'd been pushing for, wasn't it? But sitting across from this woman who looked genuinely distressed, I felt something else. Not quite sympathy, but something adjacent to it. Why didn't you just ask nicely in the first place? I said. "If you'd come to me and explained the situation, told me what you needed and when, we might have worked something out. Instead, you threatened me and tried to bully me into giving up something I'd paid for and needed. I know. I'm used to people doing what I say. As HOA president, I give orders and they get followed. I forgot how to just be a decent person asking for help." She looked up at me. "Is there any way you could talk to Patricia? Convince her to let me use the container for just the wedding weekend. I'll pay whatever she wants. Patricia doesn't want your money. She wants you to understand what it feels like to be pushed around." I do understand now. I really do. I thought about it. The vindictive part of me wanted to tell her no, to let her daughter's wedding suffer as a consequence of her behavior. But the daughter hadn't done anything wrong. She was just a young woman trying to have a nice wedding, unaware of all the drama her mother had created. "I'll talk to Patricia," I said, "but I'm not promising anything, and Deborah, you need to drop the fines, all of them. And you need to stop filing liens and sending threatening letters. If you do that, I'll drop my lawsuit for damages." She nodded quickly. "Done. I'll send you a letter today confirming all fines are dismissed. And you owe me an apology, a real one in writing that you'll share with the HOA board." "I'll do it." I called Patricia after Deborah left. She was reluctant at first, enjoying the power she held over her enemy. But when I explained about the daughter, about how the wedding wasn't really about Deborah, but about a young couple trying to celebrate their marriage, she softened. "Fine," Patricia said. "She can use the container for the wedding weekend. Friday through Sunday, that's it. And I want $1,000 rental fee, plus a written apology from her to be read at the next HOA meeting. She'll do it. And I'm still running for HOA president. Tell her that too. This doesn't mean we're friends." I brokered the deal between them. Deborah agreed to all the terms. She sent me the letter dismissing all fines, copied to my lawyer. She drafted an apology acknowledging she'd overstepped her authority and acted inappropriately. It was vague enough to save some face but specific enough to mean something. The day before the wedding, I helped Deborah's husband and son-in-law load the container with chairs, table settings, decorations, and flower arrangements. Deborah was there too, directing everything, but she was subdued. Different. She thanked me twice for helping, and she actually meant it. The wedding went off without a hitch, according to Janet, who attended as a family friend. The bride was beautiful, the ceremony was lovely, and nobody except a handful of people knew about the drama that had surrounded it. The following Tuesday, there was a regular HOA board meeting. Deborah read her apology in front of 43 homeowners who'd shown up specifically to hear it. She acknowledged abusing her authority, apologized to me by name, and thanked Patricia for her willingness to help despite their differences. Then Patricia stood and announced her candidacy for HOA president. She outlined her platform: transparent governance, fair application of rules, and an end to selective enforcement. She spoke for 10 minutes, and when she finished, the room erupted in applause. Deborah didn't run for re-election. The recall petition became unnecessary because she announced her resignation effective at the end of her term. Patricia ran unopposed and won by acclamation. I moved out of the neighborhood 2 weeks later than planned, but the delay didn't matter. The buyers were understanding when I explained what had happened, and we closed without issues. My new place was in Temp, in a neighborhood with no HOA at all. Just a loose collection of houses where people minded their own business. Before I left, I stopped by Patricia's house to say goodbye. The container was gone, returned to the rental company after the wedding weekend. Patricia looked energized, excited about her new role. "You're the one who made this happen," she said. "If you hadn't stood up to her, things would have kept going the way they were. You would have challenged her eventually. Maybe, But your situation galvanized people. It showed everyone what she was really like. Patricia handed me an envelope. This is from Deborah. She asked me to give it to you. Inside was a card with a handwritten note. It was a proper apology, more detailed than the public one, acknowledging specifically how she tried to manipulate and threaten me. It ended with a line that surprised me. I'm in therapy now, trying to understand why I became the person I became. Thank you for holding up a mirror, even though I hated what I saw in it. I drove away from that neighborhood for the last time feeling something I hadn't expected. Not triumph or vindication, but a kind of quiet satisfaction. I'd stood my ground against a bully and won. More importantly, I'd helped create space for change. Deborah was getting help. Patricia was in a position to lead fairly. The neighborhood had learned that speaking up mattered. My new place in Temp was a small house with a scraggly yard that needed work. No HOA meant I could paint my door whatever color I wanted, park whatever I wanted in my driveway, and put up a basketball hoop if I felt like it. The freedom was strange at first, almost disorienting. I'd spent 5 years following rules about grass height and mailbox colors and approved paint schemes. Now, I could do whatever I wanted within reason. Marcus helped me unpack, hauling boxes from the storage unit in Mesa. We worked for 2 days getting everything set up, and by Sunday evening, my new place actually felt like home. So was it worth it? Marcus asked, cracking open a beer as we sat on my back patio. All that drama over a shipping container, I thought about it. The stress, the legal fees, the time and energy I'd spent fighting Deborah's arbitrary demands. On paper, it seemed ridiculous. I could have just given her the container, paid the fines, avoided the whole mess. But that wasn't really what it had been about. It had been about refusing to be pushed around, about standing up for what was right even when it was inconvenient. It had been about showing a bully that not everyone would cave to threats and intimidation. Yeah, I said, it was worth it. 6 months later, I got a LinkedIn message from Patricia. She'd attached a photo of herself at an HOA conference in Tucson, representing our old neighborhood. Under her leadership, they'd revised the bylaws to prevent the kind of abuses Deborah had engaged in. They'd created an appeals process for fines and violations. They'd established term limits for board positions. Thought you'd want to see what your stand led to, her message said. The neighborhood is a better place now. Thank you for being the spark that started the fire. I looked at that photo for a long time. Patricia smiling, holding a plaque for excellence in community governance. It seemed so far removed from the day I'd stood in my driveway watching Deborah try to steal my shipping container, but it was all connected. One action had led to another, which had led to another, until real change happened. Sometimes standing your ground means more than just winning your own fight. Sometimes it means creating space for others to fight theirs. I'd refused to be bullied, and in doing so, I'd shown a whole neighborhood that they didn't have to be bullied either. Deborah never reached out to me again after that card, but I heard through Janet that she'd stepped back from community involvement entirely. She'd resigned from her country club committees and her charity boards. According to Janet, she was focusing on her therapy and trying to repair relationships with her daughter and husband, both of whom had been affected by her controlling behavior. I didn't know if she'd truly changed or if she was just laying low. It didn't really matter. What mattered was that she was no longer in a position to hurt people with her need for control. The system that had enabled her had been reformed. The neighborhood had learned its lesson. As for the shipping container that started it all, it had long since been returned to the rental company. I wondered sometimes how many other people had rented it since, how many other moves and projects it had facilitated. It was just a big metal box, nothing special. But for a few weeks in suburban Scottsdale, it had been the center of a battle over power and principle. I never regretted renting it to Patricia instead of caving to Deborah's demands. Not for a single moment. Because every time I walked through my front door in Temp, painted the exact shade of turquoise I wanted without asking anyone's permission, I remembered what it meant to stand up for myself. The story could have ended there, with me settling into my new home and leaving the HOA drama behind. But life has a way of circling back on itself, and 3 months after I moved, I got a call from Mike, my lawyer. "You remember that lawsuit against the HOA," he said. "The one for damages after they filed that fraudulent lien. I thought we dropped it as part of the settlement." We dropped it against Deborah personally, but the suit against the HOA as an entity was still pending. I've been negotiating with their insurance company. They want to settle. For how much? $15,000. They'll admit the lien was improperly filed, pay your legal fees, and compensate you for damages. The money comes from their liability insurance, not from HOA dues, so it won't hurt the homeowners. I thought about it. $15,000 was real money, more than I'd spent on legal fees and moving costs combined. But more than that, it was an acknowledgement that what Deborah had done was genuinely wrong, not just a personality conflict or a disagreement over rules. "Take the settlement," I said. The check arrived 2 weeks later. I used part of it to pay off my credit cards, another part to fix up my new house. The rest went into savings, a cushion against future emergencies. But I also did something else with that money. I made a donation to a legal aid organization that helped homeowners fight abusive HOAs. $5,000, earmarked specifically for people who couldn't afford attorneys to defend themselves against unjust fines and liens. It felt right, like closing the circle. The woman who took my donation called me personally to thank me. "You'd be surprised how many people get crushed by their HOAs," she said. "They can't afford lawyers, so they just pay whatever fines they're hit with, even when the fines are completely unjustified. Your donation will help us take on cases we'd otherwise have to turn away." That conversation stuck with me. I'd been lucky. I had enough money to hire a lawyer, enough stubbornness to fight back, enough privilege to weather the storm. Not everyone did. For every person like me who stood up to an HOA bully, there were probably dozens who couldn't, who just suffered in silence. I started volunteering with the legal aid organization, not as a lawyer, but as someone who'd been through the experience. I helped people understand their rights, navigate HOA rules, gather documentation for their cases. It was satisfying work, helping people find their voices. One case particularly stuck with me. A single mother named Rosa who lived in a Phoenix suburb, being fined by her HOA because her grass had died during a drought and she couldn't afford to replace it. The fines had accumulated to $12,000, and the HOA was threatening foreclosure. I helped her gather evidence that the HOA had waived similar violations for other homeowners, that they'd selectively enforced the rules, that the fine amounts were excessive and punitive. The legal aid attorney took the case and won. The fines were dismissed, and the HOA was ordered to pay Rosa's legal fees. When the judgment came through, Rosa cried and hugged me. "I thought I was going to lose my house," she said. "I thought there was nothing I could do." "There's always something you can do," I told her. "It's just hard to see it when you're scared and alone." That became my mission, in a small way, helping people understand they weren't powerless against institutional bullies, whether those bullies wore HOA president badges or corporate titles or government positions. Power dynamics only worked when one side believed they had no choice but to submit. A year after I moved out of Scottsdale, Patricia invited me to a neighborhood barbecue. I almost didn't go. That chapter of my life was closed, and I had no particular desire to reopen it. But curiosity won out, and on a Saturday afternoon I drove back to my old neighborhood. The changes were obvious immediately. Several houses had new paint colors that would never have been approved under Deborah's regime. One family had put up a playhouse in their front yard. Another had installed decorative shutters, small acts of individuality that made the neighborhood feel more alive, less like a showroom. Patricia greeted me warmly and introduced me to the new board members. They were a diverse group, genuinely interested in serving the community rather than ruling it. The barbecue was well attended, with families mixing and kids running around. The atmosphere was relaxed, friendly. Janet found me by the dessert table. "This is all because of you, you know," she said, gesturing at the crowd. "Standing up to Deborah changed everything. I just wanted to keep my shipping container. And Deborah just wanted to control everyone around her, but you wouldn't let her, and it mattered." Janet loaded her plate with cookies. "She's doing better, by the way. I run into her at the grocery store sometimes. She seems calmer, happier even. That's good. I never wanted to destroy her, just stop her. You did both in a way. You destroyed the person she'd become, so the person she used to be could come back." I left the barbecue as the sun was setting, driving back to Temp with a feeling of completion. That part of my life was truly over now. I'd gone back, seen the positive changes that had rippled out from my decision to stand my ground, and could finally let it all go. My life in Temp settled into a comfortable routine. I started dating someone, a woman named Rachel who worked as a teacher and had never lived in an HOA community. When I told her the story about the shipping container, she laughed and shook her head. "I can't imagine caring that much about what color someone's mailbox is," she said. "Don't people have real problems to worry about? You'd think so. But when you give someone a little bit of power, sometimes they become obsessed with using it. I'm glad you fought back. A lot of people would have just caved. A lot of people do cave. That's why people like Deborah keep getting away with it." Rachel and I moved in together after dating for 8 months. We bought a house in Gilbert, carefully researching to make sure there was no HOA. The house was smaller than my Scottsdale place had been, but it was ours, and we could do whatever we wanted with it. We painted the front door red. We planted wildflowers instead of grass. We put up string lights in the backyard. Every small act of choice felt like a celebration of freedom. 2 years after the shipping container incident, I got an email from Deborah. I almost deleted it without reading, but something made me open it. "Connor," it began. "I hope this email finds you well. I wanted to reach out and let you know that I've completed 2 years of therapy and personal development work. My therapist suggested I make amends to people I've hurt, not to make myself feel better, but to acknowledge the harm I caused. You were at the top of my list. I tried to bully you into giving me something you needed because I was too entitled to accept that I couldn't always get my way. I threatened your finances and your home because I had the power to do so, not because it was right. What I did was wrong, and I'm sorry. I'm working on being a better person. I hope you're doing well. You don't need to respond to this email. I just wanted you to know that I understand what I did and I'm sorry. Take care, Deborah." I read it twice, then showed it to Rachel. "Are you going to respond?" she asked. "I don't know. Part of me wants to acknowledge it. Part of me thinks the best response is no response. What does your gut tell you?" I thought about it for a while. What did I want from Deborah? Revenge. I'd already gotten that when she'd been forced out of the HOA presidency. Justice. That had come through the settlement and the reforms Patricia had implemented. Understanding. This email suggested she'd finally achieved that, What I wanted, I realized, was for the whole thing to finally, truly be over. And that meant responding with grace rather than silence. I wrote back, "Deborah, thank you for reaching out and for the work you've done on yourself. I appreciate the apology and I accept it. We all make mistakes. What matters is learning from them. I'm glad you're in a better place. Best wishes, Connor." It was brief but genuine. I didn't need to rehash everything or have a long conversation about feelings. The apology was enough. The acknowledgement was enough. Rachel kissed my forehead after I sent it. "You're a good person, Connor Griffith." I try to be. Doesn't always work out that way. It worked out this time. Looking back now, 5 years after the shipping container incident, I can see how much that confrontation shaped my life. It taught me that standing up for yourself matters, even when it's difficult and expensive and stressful. It showed me that systems only work when people are willing to challenge them when they become corrupt. It proved that one person really can make a difference, not by being a hero, but by simply refusing to be a victim. The shipping container is long gone, returned to whatever rental company fleet it came from, probably being used right now by someone else for some other move or project. But its impact remains. Patricia still runs the HOA in my old neighborhood, now in her 3rd term. The reforms she implemented have become a model for other communities. Deborah is apparently doing volunteer work with a domestic violence shelter, using her organizational skills for good instead of control. As for me, I'm living in a house with no HOA rules, married to Rachel now, with a baby on the way. We're already talking about what kind of playset to put in the backyard, what color to paint the nursery. Decisions we get to make without asking anyone's permission, without checking guidelines or submitting applications for approval. It's a small freedom, really. The freedom to choose your own paint color or rent a shipping container without being threatened. But small freedoms matter. They're the foundation of larger ones. And they're worth fighting for, even when the fight seems petty or pointless. Sometimes the biggest battles are fought over the smallest things. A shipping container, a basketball hoop, the wrong shade of beige. These things become proxies for larger questions about power and autonomy and respect. Standing your ground on the small things teaches you how to stand your ground on the big ones. I never expected that refusing to give up a shipping container would change my life, but it did. It taught me who I was and what I was willing to fight for. It connected me with people like Patricia who were also looking for ways to push back against injustice. It gave me a purpose beyond just my own immediate needs. And it gave me a story, one I tell at parties and dinners when the conversation turns to HOA horror stories. People always laugh at the absurdity of it, the pettiness of a woman threatening thousands of dollars in fines over a rental container. But then they get quiet, and someone always says, "I wish I'd stood up to my HOA when they tried to fine me for leaving my garbage cans out too long." Or, "I should have fought back when they rejected my solar panel application." To those people, I always say the same thing: it's never too late. You can always choose to stand your ground. You can always refuse to be bullied. It might be hard, it might be expensive, it might cause drama and stress. But the alternative is living under someone else's arbitrary control, and that's worse. The shipping container incident taught me that lesson, and I carry it with me still. Every day I walk through my red front door, I remember what it cost to earn the freedom to paint it that color. Not much, in the grand scheme of things. Just the willingness to say no to someone who expected to hear yes. That's all it takes sometimes. One no, one refusal, one person standing their ground. It won't change the world, but it might change your corner of it, and that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.